Welcome to the Dean's Roundtable podcast series with Bridget Johnson. Each month, we bring you game-changing conversations about K-12 education and leadership. Join us as top educators, field experts, and administrators share actionable strategies to transform your school community. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Dean's Roundtable podcast. I'm Bridget Johnson, the founder of the Dean's Roundtable, a space created for student-life professionals to connect, learn, share, and grow together. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce Luki Wells, a senior partner at Design Group International, where she supports nonprofit leaders, teams, and boards to co-create systems of growth, accountability, and achievement. As a process consultant, she helps organizations realize their aspirations through listening, helping, and learning. With 35 years of experience in independent schools, Luki has since earned her master's in organizational dynamics from UPenn, achieved ACCS certification, and completed 2 certifications in process consulting. She serves as co-chair of the National Association of Independent Schools Task Force on Coaching and developed the NAIS Coaches Corner. Currently, she sits on 2 nonprofit boards supporting mission-based organizations while continuing her own learning journey. On a personal note, I'm particularly excited about today's conversation because Luki and I go way back to 2007 when she handed me the reins when I took over her place as Dean of Students at Milton Academy. It's wonderful to reconnect and see how her career has flourished since our time together. Please join me in welcoming Luki Wells to the podcast. Hey, Luki.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, and what a treat to sit down with you.
Absolutely. Yes, thanks for being on.
Yeah.
So, Luki, tell us about your journey. How'd you get started in all this?
So I think it went back to, I always say it went back to being the youngest of 7. And so I was, as a friend said, as my siblings raced in and out of my room, my friends said that I was a perfect candidate for boarding school because I was used to people borrowing my clothes and touching my stuff. And I struggled academically in school, but I loved the sense of community.
Mm,
So when I started in independent schools, I was working as a learning specialist and working as a learning specialist. And that really sort of planted the seed for helping kids be effective and successful in systems and
mhm.
helping them to understand how to navigate a system that chances are wasn't going to try to meet them, but they had to understand that they are still have agency in that
Right.
process. And then helping teachers understand how to see that kids learn differently. And so that really planted a seed for me for really wanting to be a part of a community that was willing and open to helping kids understand how they could be successful. And so,
Awesome.
flash forward after graduating from college, head of school at Groton School reached out and said, "We're looking for a coach and someone to work in admissions and live in the dorms." And I raised my hand. The end is history. That was 36, 37 years ago.
Wow. So I didn't realize you had worked in admissions as well. So we
Yeah.
have almost the identical path in terms of starting in admissions and kind of moving into the dean of students office.
Yeah.
Because I too started at Episcopal High School as an admissions, well, first assistant registrar, but we kind of bypassed that year,
Yeah.
and then and then in the admissions office and as a coach and living on the dorm. So
Oh,
there you go.
yeah. You're the triple
Look at
threat.
that. Yep, triple threat. So, look, with your 35 years of experience in independent schools, how would you describe the unique support needs that Dean of Students have compared to other administrative roles?
I think it was my first. So I was a dean of students in 2 different schools,
Mm-hmm.
and one was Darrow School, which was kind of perceived as a second chance school.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second was Milton Academy, which was a very, very different
Yeah.
profile of community and culture. And it was the head of school at Darrow, Larry Van Meter, who said to me, "The dean of students job is the hardest job on campus." And I
Amen.
thought that that really struck me, and I felt like he really understood that the complexity of that role of trying to teach kids through the mistakes and the choices they make, and then trying to teach the community and the parents that this wasn't the last choice they're ever going to make in their lives.
Right.
So we can't define them by their mistakes.
Awesome. And so, your work with senior administrative teams, how would you describe the unique support needs that Dean of Students have compared to other administrative roles?
So in my first role as dean of students at Darrow School, the head of school said to me that the dean of students is the hardest role on campus, and
Uh-huh.
I felt that way, but I didn't feel like I was seen that way.
Mm,
I think I was being interpreted as the rule keeper, the disciplinarian, and I really early on recognized that it was about teaching kids through the choices they made. And so I would say we're going to do development over discipline. And so trying to teach, so I saw myself as a teacher and someone
uh-huh.
who held boundaries, and the community saw me as a disciplinarian. And
Right.
so it was really helpful for the other administrators who not only had my back, as it were, that support really mattered to me when I had a bad day, and
Mm-hmm.
it was a tough decision, and you get defined by that decision, or you're the bad person because that kid had to be kicked out. So the support I saw it was mostly from my fellow administrators, and then
Mm-hmm.
the solace personally that I got from thinking I want to develop these kids. I don't want to discipline them.
Yeah, and you said something that I want to kind of reiterate. The dean of students job is so hard, and
Oh,
oftentimes, folks in those positions go kind of overlooked unless something bad. No one's coming in the front of the school and saying we want to just thank the dean of students. That never happens, and so if someone is amplifying the dean of students, it's because of something that didn't go right, right? And so
exactly.
you always feeling like gosh, and either I have to kind of be front and center and deal with this kind of major issue that's going on, or I'm actually really trying to hide because I don't want to have to deal with anyone. And just trying to figure out how to exist between those two worlds
Yeah.
can sometimes be challenging. And
Yes.
and really having a support system, having a good team,
Yep.
I've learned is super important. But also having folks that you can vent to, whether it's other folks on campus or other colleagues who are doing the same work that you're doing in other
Definitely.
schools.
Yep.
Having some sort of community is super important.
Really.
And I think kind of goes, people don't think about it as much and don't
Mhm.
think about how much support that person in that position really could use.
Yeah. Yep.
And I hope that this conversation will amplify that a little
I
bit.
do too. I do too, and I would throw in a good therapist or a good coach in
There
that
you go.
collection of
Absolutely.
support. There is, because you can't do it alone. What your point is that you can't do it alone, and you don't need to do it alone, right?
No,
You can get the
you
support you
absolutely
need.
should not do it alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so let's switch gears a little bit. So we
Right.
talked about support for Dean of Students, but you also work with senior administrative teams in your current role. And so, what are the most common challenges these teams face in independent schools, and how does that effective support address these challenges?
I think that I find in the work I'm doing with senior administrative teams is they need assurances that they're
Mm,
doing the right thing, that if they can find their own North Star, whatever that means to them,
uh-huh.
whether it's spirituality or support or physical exercise, whatever it is to help you recognize that you are doing the right thing, and to listen to others when they give you feedback for not your character flaws, but
Yeah.
how decisions affect people. Because as I support them, they will say, "Well, the families think this, or the board thinks this," and it's, "What do you think? What does
Mm.
your gut tell you? What you're an expert." And they almost lose their sense of identity and credibility and strength when they're being pummeled. Quite honestly.
Yeah, it's hard to keep those things intact when you feel like you're being attacked.
Yeah,
Usually.
yeah, and so I like to think of, relationship with yourself. Are you taking
Hmm.
care of yourself? Your relationship with one another in and amongst the team, and then the
Hmm.
team as a whole.
Yeah.
And because you are an island,
Yep.
and people don't everyone's got an opinion about what you do.
Absolutely. And so when you first kind of start working with administrative teams, do you first start with kind of kicking the tires to see what relationship they have with each other, what the team dynamic is? Because, I have found, and I have worked with I've been on some really great teams,
Mm,
and I've been on some teams that were terrible, quite
yeah.
frankly. And the difference is the relationship and the psychological safety we had amongst each other, be able to speak freely,
Hmm.
but also feel like there wasn't kind of the hierarchy there, that you couldn't disagree or be critical of someone else based on their position. And when you have people that can work together in that way, you can do the challenging thing together,
Yeah.
and you can actually really kind of affect some real change. So I'm curious to know, like, kind of what you first start to look at when you are working with administrative teams.
What I like to do, my process is to interview people individually first
Okay.
and ask them all the same series of questions, like, how's it going? Do you feel heard? Do you feel seen?
Mm-hmm.
What's working? What's not working? And just trying to get a sense of their experience with the team, because away from others, they're more likely to be candid. And I try
Yep.
to reassure them, that I'm not, if they're angry about fall foliage, I'm not going to say, oh, when we talked about fall foliage. So everyone's sort of looking, I wanted the patterns to be about the patterns and not the individual. So I'm looking for both what they say and what they don't say.
Mm,
And then I feel strongly that we have to break bread together. So whether it's,
nice.
having coffee, or somebody brings in breakfast, or we sit for lunch, I look at those exchanges as well. And
Mm-hmm.
then I believe you use the word trust. And if you don't see and feel trust among a team, that's really problematic. And the number of teams that I've sat on or observed, when there's that one person not doing their job,
Mm.
it's that person gets vilified overtly and covertly,
Yeah.
and everything gets placed on them, whether they deserve it or not. All
Mm-hmm.
the vilifying gets placed on one person, and sometimes they warrant it, and sometimes they don't. But the team identifies a common enemy, which
Yeah.
typically can be the leader, but other times it's the person that's not pulling their weight.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to help them understand, call that out and pull that, not call it out, call it in, and helping them to work with it.
And so is that something, so once you kind of I don't know if you call it trust radar or whatever,
Yeah,
that your spidey senses come up
yeah,
because you're like, ooh, this group isn't working well together. Do you name that immediately, or do you kind of give it some time? I mean, obviously, I guess it depends on how much time you have to work
yeah,
with this team. You don't want to kind of belabor the point if you don't have a lot of time to work with them. But
yeah.
is it something you jump right into and say, hey, we've got to fix this? There's a thing here that we need to kind of call out and talk about.
I tend to be, you're right, that it depends on the amount of time you have, because if it's I don't like one-offs. I don't like
Mm,
meet with us for 3 hours and we're done. I like
yeah.
time in between, and 3 hour blocks of time rather than 6 or 8, or even if it's a night, we go away for a night. You
Uh-huh.
have, you break bread at night, and then you get together and work the next day. And that, you're naming spidey sense as a dean of students. It's like you got it in spades. It is well curated, cultivated, and cared for, and you need it. And so
Mhm.
when I see it, I try to name it, but I try to name it by behaviors I'm observing.
Okay.
And sometimes it's like, that's what needed to happen. That's what needed to get the conversation going.
Gotcha.
And if you're the person not pulling your own weight, you know it. You know it as well as everybody else does. And so it's people tend to be, if they've built trust among themselves, people will be pretty quick to say, this doesn't feel good for me either. And
Gotcha.
and then trying to create a safe space, safe container, so people can say what they need to say to one another.
Yeah. So you had mentioned, like, there's kind of one of two types of folks who kind of get vilified in those situations, either the person who's not pulling their weight, or
Mhm.
perhaps the head, or the person who's kind of in the highest leadership position in that
Yeah.
group. So let's talk about heads of school a little bit, and because you do support heads as well. So what sort of support is required by heads of school that's different from senior administrators? And what approaches have you found most effective?
I'll say is when I thought about that question, I was remember being a senior administrator and
Mm-hmm.
trying to always, always, always trying to get time alone with the head of school so I could be plain spoken, which
Mm,
is not always popular. But,
right.
most heads will tell you people are always, saying, "You're great. It was great. I love that decision," then saying something that wasn't complimentary behind your back.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when I was plain spoken, it wasn't my place to do it, but no one else was gonna say it. And it really, really hurt one relationship in particular
Mm,
that I was plain spoken, and that didn't feel good, but nobody else was saying it. It's like, "Come on, you guys." So I think they need authentic feedback. I needed authentic feedback as a head of school.
sure.
And sometimes I found myself asking for it in unusual places, and people are like, "You really wanna know what I think?" It was like, "Well, no one else will tell me, so you will." So I think it's the courage of giving feedback and the courage to receive it
Mm,
and not take it as a personal affront. And I'm
right.
sure my delivery, before I learned about coaching was not always easy, but it was never intended to be malicious. And so I think
Right.
a head of school needs candor, and they need safe candor.
Yes.
And to be, at Milton, we talking about that administrative team, that was an island of mecca for me as a dean of students. And there were people on that team that just really were plain spoken, and I so admired their capacity to hold two truths of really admiring the head of school and saying
Mm-hmm.
what needed to be said.
Yeah. There's something to be said about that for sure, and it's helpful for everyone involved when you can be plain spoken. It doesn't necessarily feel good in the moment,
Mhm.
but that's where the lessons are learned. And
Absolutely.
if everyone's always in agreement, there's
Yeah,
never any opposition. What are we learning from those experiences? Not
yeah,
very much, right?
yeah. I
And
think the other thing I'd say about a head of school and support is they need to feel safe,
yeah.
and so that, the administrative team ought to be a place for that, and the board
Mm-hmm.
chair and head of school relationship is really important, and I think, people enter that relationship with hearts and minds open,
Yeah.
and it just people confuse that at times that it's a friendship. It's not a
Mm.
friendship. It's
Nope.
a relationship. It's a
It's a relationship,
professional
and that is different.
relationship, and feelings get hurt
Yeah.
often with that relationship because they don't understand their role. Each doesn't understand the managing up and the managing down
Yeah.
piece.
No, absolutely. And so you talked about boards. That's a great segue into my next question in terms of board dynamics, and they can significantly impact school operations. And so, what does effective support for board members look like, especially as they navigate their governance role?
Oh, man. So, do we have 3 hours? So, when I was in grad school, I my thesis was about our boards prepare what do boards need in order to lead a culture change in a nonprofit. And I mostly interviewed board chairs and
Hmm.
executive directors. And they said that board at the end of the day, board members didn't really understand their role.
Mm,
And so it's either work, wisdom, or wealth. And just because you're wealthy doesn't mean you're wise. And just because you work hard for the school doesn't mean you're wise. It means you have a big heart and you want to participate, but it doesn't just because you're one doesn't mean you're all three. And
right.
so don't mistake your contributions at the, serving food at Fest as a reason to having a strong opinion about how admission should be done. So I think the best thing that a board can do is to get the training and
Yes.
and not put that on the head of school. Put that the board needs to take responsibility for its training, and the board chair needs to understand their role
Yeah.
both as a board chair vis-a-vis the head of school and a board chair vis-a-vis the board as a whole, and then
Mm-hmm.
the board member as a member of the school community.
Yep. I think that makes a lot of sense. And so we've talked about deans of students, we've talked about senior leadership teams, we've talked about heads of school and boards. And so, in your experience, what are the common threads in supporting different leadership roles across independent schools?
I think it's the common thread really would be really candor and
Mm-hmm.
trust. And I think about that, when we were both deans of students, we had to make difficult decisions.
Right.
And if people don't trust you, then there's the decision and then there's your role in that decision. And people confuse the two, that there was a kid made a mistake, made a choice. You and I didn't make that choice. And so that trust of the community of your decision making, and really the decision making wasn't you didn't make it up on the spot. It's the
Right.
culture of the school. It's sort of you're the torchbearer of the boundaries the school is needing to set, and the teachings to kids and parents and community members about that decision and why the school stands for in that way. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's kind of those are pieces that get carried through every senior administrative position and the head of school. That so you got to build that trust, and
Right.
the way to build that trust is to have the support of someone who will give you that feedback. To me, it's all kind of interconnected,
Mm-hmm.
because if you walk through the day thinking, I'm the best ever, and no one's going to give you the feedback of, well,
Maybe
you
not.
know, every day are you the best ever? So you need an ego that can accept that your decision making, whether you're a dean of students or a head of school or board chair, is something that people want to trust you. They want to like you. They want you to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to be open to giving and getting feedback that's authentic, and to me that's the support. I think about when I was a head of school, did I support my, did I or even as a dean, did I support assistant deans in a way that allowed them to go out and make the decisions they needed to make? And when they made mistakes, we could talk about it in a way that they felt like they were learning rather than being reprimanded. And
Right.
I didn't always do that well. My feedback sometimes was harsh and judgmental, and that's not being very supportive, right?
Mm,
It's the learning journey that we're all going through in these roles.
absolutely. Yeah, we learn from those times, and then we can better support folks who are going through those times
Yeah,
because you've got specific examples to say this is what not to do.
yeah.
So, how is your transition from being, a dean of students and a head of school to becoming a process consultant inform your understanding of support for systems and I'm going to start over.
All right.
Taking a beat. How was your transition from being a dean of students and also a head of school to becoming a process consultant informed your understanding of support systems in independent schools?
I think what is remarkable to me is, as I do the work I do as a process consultant, a number of times people will say, "Well, what did you do?" Or just tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And, because I'm who I am, I'm like, oh, I could tell you so many stories about what I did well and what I didn't do well, but we're here to talk about you. And and then there are times when I say, wow, I just stunk up the room with a
Mm-hmm.
decision when I did X, Y, and Z. And this is how I recovered from it, or this is what I learned from it,
Mm-hmm.
kind of as an example. And so I think what all that has taught me, being a senior administrator, a flawed senior administrator at times and a really good one at times,
Mm-hmm.
was kind of collecting those wins and losses, or those moments, and having empathy and grace towards people that I'm working with. Because I sit with an administrative team now, and watching them. I was just
Mm-hmm.
using this example earlier where I'll have a coaching client, and I can see we confuse the light at the end of the tunnel. I see it as a
Uh-oh.
train coming straight towards that person, and they see it as a light at the end of the tunnel. And as a coach, I can't say, "Watch out for that light."
Right.
You know, what do you think might be coming toward you? And how do you think that comment landed with somebody? And
Mm-hmm.
so thinking about, I cherish my experiences because I tried to learn from them and not run away from them. And I've had, same as you on campus, people giving you feedback all the time. And, if you didn't take it as a tool in your toolkit, then it's a wasted opportunity.
Yeah.
And so I will use examples of when I didn't do a good job just
Mm-hmm.
to demonstrate that, this person is not alone in the work you do, that, and whether it was an individual mistake or as a team, we didn't do work well together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't spend a lot of time saying, well, when I was a dean of students or, when I was a head of school,
Right.
but there are lessons in there that, and threads of who I am and threads
Absolutely.
of my blind spots,
Mm-hmm.
that are revealed to me as I do the work or I take an assessment, a psychological assessment. And it's like, a common thread that I've had throughout my work is I will have an idea and I can see how it will, help the community or be a really good idea for everybody. But I forgot to explain how I got to where I thought it was a good idea. So I'm sort of, someone said, don't lead the troops so far ahead that they think you might be the enemy, which I
That's a
love.
good one.
Yeah, that, you have a good idea, but you gotta teach people, you gotta bring them along. And so I think that as I learned about coaching and learned about process consulting, that it's not about, I might have had some of those skill sets in me, but I also had some bad behaviors in me that I had to
Mm,
learn to let go.
yeah.
And so
So you talked about coaching, and I mentioned earlier in the introduction that you developed the NAIS. I don't know why I'm having a hard time with that today.
yeah.
NAIS Coaches Corner, and I had no idea that you had created that. So talk about the origins, how that all got
So
started.
so I actually saw it at a women's conference,
Mm,
and where women coaches offer no, men and women offered coaching to women in at this conference for 30 minutes. And there
okay.
were women, we didn't have signups in advance. There were women, wrapped around the whole
Wow.
expo center wanting to get coached. And I thought, why don't we have this, everywhere?
Yeah.
I called and I asked Trina Gary
Mm-hmm.
to help me and a certified coach and consultant as well. And I said, let's approach NAIS with this idea that we would offer, I would find coaches and we
Mm-hmm.
would offer pro bono coaching during the conference.
Mm-hmm.
People would sign up in advance. And my first year, I wrote to all the associations, the accrediting regional associations, and said, do you have recommendations for coaches?
Mm-hmm.
And I got a long list of coaches, and so
Okay.
wrote them all and said, would you be interested in doing this? And we had 17 coaches join us that
Nice.
first year, and I had like 25 apply. This year, I had 56 people apply to be coaches.
Wow.
And so I brought out 20 coaches
Okay.
and we coached for 2 days, 2 full
Mm-hmm.
days. And it's a half an hour and people sign up in advance and they look at the model of coach they want to work with. And
Mm-hmm.
everybody's a certified coach through the International Coaching Federation
Okay.
and has been a senior administrator in an independent school. So
Awesome.
not necessarily head of school, but senior
Sure.
administrators. And really trying to make sure it's a diverse group, that it's small schools, large school experience, West Coast, East Coast, North,
Mm-hmm.
South, and then looking for cultural diversity as well. And I'm just so proud of the team. They're just
That's amazing. That's it's really really awesome, and I think so
thank you.
needed. I don't think people, and I didn't. I think I took for granted having coaching and mentoring early on in my career and just thought that I'm sure everyone does it, but they don't.
Yeah.
And it's really, really helpful to have
Hmm.
at all stages, not just in the beginning, right? So
Right.
beginning, middle, and end. Like you need someone to kind of give you a kind of outside snapshot of what you look like, or
Yeah.
be able to
It's
bounce things off of someone else that's outside of your current school, who's also not a colleague, who can really be critical if need be,
yeah.
or supportive and helpful in times that are, particularly difficult. And
Yeah.
so I think it helps with mental health,
Yeah.
being able to have those types of conversations and help just kind of elevate you in your career. So
Yeah.
I really commend you guys for putting that together.
Thank you.
So I guess my next question is, how do you help school leaders create systems of accountability while maintaining the collaborative culture that's so often central to independent schools?
Boy, it's interesting. The idea of accountability is so can be so squishy,
Mm,
and and I think for women in particular to hold others accountable, we can confuse being firm with being mean. And I
mm.
learned that as a dean of students, a female dean of students, that because I was firm and clear, I was called many different names, and that didn't please and thank you and Mrs. Wells or
Right.
Ricky. It was, I'm this or that, and it's really being clear again. Back to that North Star, being
Hmm.
having clarity around what's right and what's wrong, and what's best for the system and the individual at the same time. And when I was thinking about this conversation, two moments in which I got called to task for being firm and clear, which I
Mm,
mistook as so. One example was I called a parent my first go round as dean of students, and I said, your son was caught doing something, and
hmm.
here's the penalty, here's the responsibility, our response. This is
Hmm.
what you need to tell him, and I was just like, this is the list.
Mm,
And at the end of a 45-minute conversation, the parent said, "Can I give you some feedback?" And I was like, "Sure." And he said, "You never asked me how am I doing, or you never said how my child was
mm.
doing. You just went right to the
Right
rules
into it.
and the
Yep.
school's response." And I was like, "Thank you so much for," I said, "I'm so nervous telling you that they made a mistake and this is the response and we're going to the discipline committee and this is the outcome." And I just didn't even think about that. I was just so nervous
Yep.
about being right and wanting to win the conversation. And and it was like, what a mistake, just what,
Yeah.
and what a gift. And so after that, after a particular squishy question, conversation, sometimes I
Uh-huh.
would call people and say, can we talk through that conversation? Because it didn't feel good to me.
Yeah.
And I learned so much from those conversations when families would say, you were so rigid or you were so
Mm-hmm.
cold. And it was like,
Mm-hmm.
you're right. I was so nervous. Uh, and just and so eventually I would have when I was a head of school, I had the school counselor sit in on some of the meetings
Mm-hmm.
so we could debrief afterwards, and she would sort of head us off before I would get too rigid or too, like
Yeah.
that's the way it's going to be. And it was so helpful to debrief with her and hear her perspective about how I managed the situation
Yeah. The
because,
power of the debrief. My
oh,
goodness, I don't think that is done enough, and I'm glad you highlighted that today
good.
because for a couple of reasons. And I think it's both the debrief, but also kind of thinking about, these conversations and maybe playing out these conversations before you have the actual conversation
Oh
so
yeah,
someone can give you some feedback. But really, also, in addition to that, the debrief and talking about how it went and talk about how you felt because
yeah,
while you have to put those your emotions aside and be professional and all of that, there's still emotion behind it. And if we never talk about that stuff, where does it go?
totally
Um,
agree.
Where
Totally
does
agree.
it go? And
Yeah.
so I really appreciate you saying, the debrief, because
Mhm.
I think we get so kind of intent on checking the things off the list. Okay, I did the call. It's
Yeah.
over. And move on to the next thing where we don't spend a little bit of time processing what just happened. What are
Mhm.
your takeaways from the
Yeah.
conversation? Are there things that you want to do differently? Did someone give you some feedback, and what are you going
Yeah.
to do with that feedback? And so
Yeah.
thank you for bringing that up. I think it's super
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
So I guess that my next question, in thinking about independent schools, because they are independent, so each one's a little bit different, right? And so, how
Yes.
do you balance honoring their unique culture and tradition while still encouraging necessary growth and change?
I love that question, and um, you'll appreciate this. Having worked, so starting my professional career out at a faith-based school,
Mm,
regardless of my beliefs, there was a higher order that the school culture appreciated and recognized and talked
uh-huh.
about. And I would say that more than half of my schools have been faith-based schools
Mm,
or schools that held their culture high,
mm,
and it mattered to them, and it was, for the most part, a healthy culture. And so thinking about sort of using those tenets of there's something bigger than us going on here. And
sure.
so we can, and again, regardless of how you may feel about that higher calling, it
Mm-hmm.
is something to kind of check us. And so, and some schools, Quaker schools, people use it to sort of weaponize
Mm.
decision, their discontent with, that's not being very Quakerly, or, that's not how we would do it in our church.
Mm,
And that may be, but there's something bigger out there than us. And
right.
so to be able to acknowledge that and
Mm-hmm.
work within that culture, and understand that this is not about you and me. It's not about Lukey thinking drinking's bad. It
Right.
is about, in order for everybody to be safe, we have to have a through line,
Right.
and you've crossed that through line this time.
Mm-hmm.
And when I have to say I loved it when kids would come in and say, "Man, what that guy did," after you read a disciplinary
Yeah.
statement, the kids would come in and say, "What were they thinking?"
Right.
You're kind of secretly relieved that,
Yes, you're like, thank goodness.
yeah, right. Okay, you get that's bad.
You're right.
And kids appreciate that there are boundaries,
Well,
and
right. And that's, it's so interesting that people, sometimes like, yeah, I can't believe these kids are testing the boundaries. That's what they're supposed to do. They need to, and it's our job to show them where the boundaries are.
totally.
And can you put your toe on the boundary? Can you get an elbow over the line? Like, which one is it? Like,
Yep,
show me so I'll know for next time. And so,
yep.
it's something that we have to continually reinforce,
Mhm.
because if the boundary seems squishy, that's no bueno. And so
Yeah,
you have to make sure. And I know just feels like sometimes it feels exhausting, but
yep.
in order to, like you said, preserve community, have a safe
Mhm.
community, we have to kind of uphold that standard. And that's the role of the deans and the administrative team. Well, you hope the deans and the
Yeah,
administrative team, not
right.
just the deans, right? And
Yeah,
all the adults there on campus. We're providing structure and boundaries so that students can learn and grow in a safe environment.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think one of the big takeaways from this conversation is that not only do you not have to do this alone, that those rules are not about, again, they're not about Bridget, they're not about Lukey, they're not about, name the person in that role. They're about the
Right.
community, and they're about,
Exactly.
us upholding a sense of community together.
Mm-hmm. So important. And I think, it's hard for students and sometimes adults alike to remember that it's
Yeah.
not just about the individual or this particular incident. It's really about the community as a whole.
Mhm.
And it's also important for deans to remember, like, the reason why we have these rules, or reason why we have to enforce them. We want to make sure that the process we go through is individual for the student,
Mhm.
but it's still about the community. And
Yeah.
holding the both of those at the same time is super important. Being
Yeah.
true to the individual, but also being true to the community, and that
Mhm.
sometimes is tricky,
Yes.
to say the least, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the things we haven't talked about at all, I think is super important. My man was like, maybe I should have ordered these questions differently. But listening is really important in these
Yeah.
conversations, and the fact that you listen to that parent after they gave you some feedback is important. And so, talk about what role listening plays in your process consulting approach.
So it's I loved learning about listening through the coaching program that I went through.
Uh-huh.
And also our firm talks a lot about listening, helping, and learning.
Mm,
And thinking about listening as not I hear, I'm absorbing your emotions. It's thinking about what am I hearing you say? What
mm-hmm,
am I hearing you say auditorily? And what am I hearing that you're not saying? And what am I observing
mm,
as you're talking? So listening it's called listening architecturally,
mm.
right? So it's
Okay.
are my hands crossed? Or is that vein on my forehead
Popping
popping
out.
out? You've seen one or two of those, or
Maybe a couple.
and I love this idea of listening architecturally because you're working at hearing what someone has to say rather than, wow, that's harsh. How is that landing with me?
Mm,
And I love the idea of, asking open-ended questions, listening to what people have to say, and then listening carefully enough that I can reflect back to them what I'm hearing. So
mm.
that it is not about me. It's about
Right.
the questions and the space we've created together, and being able to reflect back without, not, "You sound really angry," but, what I'm hearing you say is that I was when I was reporting out what your child did, that didn't land easily for you.
Right.
And so being able to identify the behavior that you're hearing rather than how it landed with me. And then, so reflecting it back, and then also trying to be curious with that exchange.
Mm,
So, how can I be helpful, or what might help next time, or how
mm-hmm.
do you want to move forward? Asking again these open ended questions with curiosity
Yep.
is all part of listening in that exchange.
Being curious is so important,
Isn't
and not, I that was one of the lessons I had to learn as a dean is like you think you know the story. You don't know the story. Please ask all the questions.
Yeah,
Please stop assuming that you know the story because nine
yeah,
times out of 10, you do not know the story. So
exactly.
I definitely
Exactly.
appreciate you bringing that up. So, Luke, as we think about closing today,
Uh-huh.
what are some takeaways you would give to deans, to senior admin teams, to head of schools, to boards?
Yeah, I think there is no original art. You are not alone, and other people have gone before you
Mm,
and learned lessons that you will learn, so you can process with others who've gone before you or going through this. So, to your point, there are other deans. The Dean's Roundtable is a great place to unpack things, pick up the phone and debrief, just what just happened,
mm-hmm.
and get support for yourself and get support
Yes.
for your team. And it doesn't have to be, anything fancy. It can be a shared agreement amongst you,
Mm-hmm.
and it can be using retreat time, and not all the retreat time. Break bread together, do things together that feel good
Mm-hmm.
and help you develop trust as a board, as a head of school, as a dean of students, and just please know you're not alone. You are not alone. There are many of us. I have a bunch of gray hairs in here that I'm trying to hide. I hope Andre can help me with that. Who, and when I was a dean of students at Milton Academy, Birch Ford had gone before me, David Torcoletti.
Mm-hmm.
I called them and said, "How do I do this?" Or, "Have you seen this before?" Draw upon the senior administrative team, because you don't have to create anything new.
You absolutely do not. That is correct. And I think that's a great place for us to end. Lukey, I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to reconnect
Yes.
and that we are having this conversation today. And like I said, I think it's awesome what you guys are doing in terms of the coaching piece through NAIS. And I hope that
Thank you.
continues. Let people know how they can get in touch with you if they'd like some coaching or like to hear more about what you're up to.
Sure. I'm with Design Group International, and I'm at Lukiew, Lukiew at designgroupinternational.com. And
Awesome.
I would love to hear from people and understand how I can be helpful to them.
Awesome. And so we'll also put that at the end of
Okay.
the podcast as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you. It was so great to see your face and have you on today. And as always, thanks for spending time with us on the Dean's Roundtable podcast. Have a good one.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Dean's Roundtable podcast. Is your student life program delivering on your mission? Our new K-12 student life assessment moves you beyond anecdotes to evidence-based decisions. Through comprehensive stakeholder surveys and expert analysis, you'll get concrete insights across 8 essential dimensions of student life, from culture and wellness to staff effectiveness and resource allocation. We are seeking founding partner schools to be first to experience this transformative assessment process and help shape the future of student life evaluation. And because this work shouldn't be done in isolation, join our Student Life Professionals community of practice, facilitated monthly with Trey Education. Connect with fellow deans and student life leaders for real-time support, idea exchange, and solutions to your biggest challenges. 8 sessions per year plus ongoing collaboration through our shared messaging group. Whether you need data-driven insights, peer connection, or both, we're here to support your student life leadership. Learn more at deansroundtable.org. Today's episode was hosted by Bridget Johnson in conversation with Lukey Wells, produced and edited by Andrick Sigmund, and music by PremiumBeat.com. For any questions, contact information can be found in the episode description. And, as always, thanks again for listening.